I really feel like the Lord is calling me to mix with humanity and let them know that God is real and that God works in your life. My story begins, like I said, I was raised in the Cayman Islands, on the island of Grand Cayman. And my dad is from Cayman. He went to Mobile as a young man and worked with a physician who was an ENT doctor, and he learned he did optometry work. This was during the war, and he met my mom. Within 24 hours, he told her he loved her. Within 3 months, they were married. He ended up joining the Navy, and they lived in Mobile. When he got out of the war, 3 of 5 children were born there, and it was my older brother Michael, my twin brother Stephen, and myself. They bought a little house. They were happy. They were living life, having fun, and they got a letter saying that my grandfather had fallen and broken his arm and couldn't work, and he was a shipbuilder. And my dad was one of 10 children and the eldest son, so he felt obligated to go back to Cayman to help his family. So he packed us all up, much to my mother's dismay, and went back to Cayman. So that's how I ended up living there for most of my childhood. They had been brought up in Christian families, they were not unknown to Christianity, but they were partiers and drinkers, and they cocktail parties all the time. And my mom was at a cocktail party serving drinks, and she came across this gentleman that had just arrived on the island, and he was the head of the BWIA, British West Indian Airways. And she tried to give him a drink, and he says, "No, I don't drink." And he said, "I used to drink, but I almost died from liver disease." And he said, "The Lord, healed me, and I'm a Christian, and I do not drink." And so my mom and dad became acquainted with this couple, and they were converted. They were instrumental in starting the Church of Christ there in the Cayman Islands. A couple of years later, the Seventh-day Adventist minister moved into the house next door to us. And they had 2 little girls, and we all played together, and my mom was good friends with them. And we were going to the Church of Christ, and she became convicted of the Sabbath. So she decided that she would bring her minister to, I guess, have a discussion or a debate with our Adventist minister friend. So he came over, and they had a discussion. I guess it got quite heated, and we ended up being disfellowshipped from the Church of Christ. And so we started attending the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The Church of Christ is very Bible-oriented, and so, she was reading the Bible and studying, and came across the Sabbath thing, and is like, "Well, why are we going to church on Sunday if it says that the 7th day is the Sabbath?" And so she was the type that if the Lord led her to a truth or whatever, she was going to follow it out. And that's what she did. So she felt the need to have us in an Adventist school. By this time, our neighbor pastor friend had moved they were from Jamaica. They had moved back to Jamaica. And my brother and I, and my older brother, all 3 of us, went to school in Jamaica. My twin brother and I lived with the pastor and his family. And we went to the equivalent of the elementary school, which was associated with West Indies College. So I graduated from the equivalent of 7th and 8th grade from Jamaica. And then I came back home, and I'm not sure, I might have spent a little time at home going to school. And then my mom had a real bad infection in her finger and her thumb. She thought she was going to have to have her thumb amputated, so she went to Mobile to have medical care. When she was there, she read an article in a magazine, it might have been These Times or something like that, written by Paul Harvey. And he was talking about this brand new school that had just opened up in Lumberton, Mississippi, called Bass Memorial Academy. And so she called, and the principal of the academy came and visited her in the hospital. And that fall, Stephen and I went to Bass Memorial Academy. And so we lived in Mississippi and went to school there. And as time went on, my parents ended up moving back to the States, and I went to a public high school in Detroit. That was an eye-opener, and ended up then graduating from public high school in Detroit. But then I went to Andrews University for college. And Steve graduated, well, he didn't graduate from Andrews. He later graduated with a Bachelor of Education. But I met Steve there, and we ended up getting married in a year and a half. And he worked as teacher and a principal for a few years, and then we came to Orlando, and I never thought we would stay in Orlando because you know how things move all the time. But he taught 7th and 8th grade at Fleece. We had 2 children then. We did Pathfinders and, you know, all the kids' departments and all that sort of stuff. In the midst of all of with the 2 kids and working and going to church, you know, we were the regular young couple. I remember walking out into the backyard one day and looking up into the sky, and I thought, is everything that I know about God and Adventism and all this stuff, is this really true? Is there really a God up there? You know, I just didn't feel any connections or like any conviction, I should say, at that point in life, and I was questioning. And then shortly after that is when, at work, I encountered Charles. It was during that time, that was the mid to early 80s, that I was working at Florida Hospital in the metabolic support team. In that job, there was a pharmacist, a dietitian, and a nurse. And during that time, I met a young man from Mobile, Alabama, and he was had terminal cancer. And I wasn't sure how he got there or why he was in Orlando. And at that time, I thought, what can I do to extend the healing ministry of Christ to this young couple? And by that evening, I thought I could help them get back to Mobile before he died. I talked to the social worker, and he said, well, I'm trying to see if I can find air ambulance, but he said it'll be at least a couple weeks before I can get anything done. And I knew that he would not last that long. So this was Wednesday afternoon. I had a very, very restless night that night, but I felt so impressed that that's what the Lord wanted me to do. So on Thursday morning, I found myself walking over to the conference office, and I was going to ask the president of the Florida conference if he would loan me a plane. And I was scared to death. So I went over there, asked to speak to him, and I was told that he was out of the office and he would be gone for a while. I mean, he was out of town. So we contacted this friend of ours who went to Markham Woods Church. We were in Markham Woods Church by then. He said, I will call and see if I can get the plane. So he called and he got permission to use the plane. But he said, we cannot provide fuel, and it's going to cost at least $500. So I talked to someone in Patient Financial Services, and they said, we will find $500 from somewhere to buy that fuel for you. So we had a plane, we had the funding for fuel. I went to all the departments that, like Central Supply and Pharmacy, and to get the equipment. And every department I went to, no one gave me any questions about what do you need this for, you can't do that, or had me sign anything. And then I was up in the room, in Charles's room, and the respiratory therapist was talking to me, and of course he's on oxygen and everything. The assistant director came up, and I thought, oh boy. But she came in and explained exactly what was going to happen with blood gases when I got up to a certain elevation and how I needed to handle that, and was so supportive. And they even had people from respiratory department come, and they went over to the plane and they took out the seats so that they could fit the oxygen tank in the plane. Well, everything was handled. This was all taking place on Thursday. The next hurdle that I had to cross was to ask his physician if he would discharge him. I hadn't done that yet. And also to get a physician in Mobile who would accept him as a patient. So I called the Mobile Infirmary, I think it was the Mobile Infirmary, and there was a senior resident who said that he would accept him as a patient. Then I called the attending physician, and his office said that he was out of town. And I thought, this is never going to happen. They gave me the number of the physician who was covering for him, and I called him. And normally, a covering physician will not discharge another doctor's patient, especially in this type of a situation. But he came into the hospital, and he took myself and Charles's wife into a conference room. And he said, this is a wonderful thing you're doing. And he had prayer with us. And I knew exactly that this was God handling the whole thing. So by Friday morning, we were ready. Everything was set. An ambulance took us to the airport. We loaded Charles on the plane. His wife was sitting back there. She had never flown in her life, and she's in the back of this little 2-engine plane. And she was knitting furiously the whole time. We flew to Mobile, and Charles made it okay. I just did comfort measures on him basically, and kept him going. We arrived there, and an ambulance met us at the airport and took us to the hospital. The ER was ready to accept him, and they just kind of descended on him and took over, and his family was there waiting. The other thing that was so miraculous to me was that my mom and dad had just flown in from Cayman and were in Mobile. They would come up and spend the summer months in their home in Mobile. And so we contacted them, and they came to the hospital and picked us up, took us all out to dinner, and then drove us back to the airport so that we could fly back. And we flew back Friday night. And the next day, I received a call saying that Charles had passed away in the morning or around noon, but his family, everybody was with him. So we accomplished the task God had given us to do. And that was my true conversion experience, because I knew from then on there was a God, and He knew me, and He will work and do whatever He can to help you and to be with you. When God opens a door for you or gives you an impression of doing something for Him, step out in faith, and God will open all the other doors that are needed to accomplish that task. At first I felt like, God was honoring my faith in stepping out to do something. And then as time went on, I realized that it wasn't just God honoring something that I was doing, but He was actively seeking me and letting me know that He was there. I remember after this thing, I was just so excited. I was like, we went on a camp out with some camping club or something, and I had to get up and tell my testimony. But, I talked to them, and I was just like on cloud nine forever. And to me, that, when you really are converted, that's what happens. You have a story to tell, and you want everyone to know that story. On October the 28th, it was a Saturday night, Steve and I were working in the kitchen together. I had made potato salad, and I was using a salt grinder, and I was grinding, and it felt like something was lifting my left hand. And I thought, that's strange. And it was like October 28th, and I thought, I do not believe in all this Halloween stuff, but this is weird. And I turned around to try to explain to Steve what I was feeling, and I realized I wasn't speaking properly. And he said that my left arm went limp. And so he just guided me to a chair and sat me down and called 911. They were there within 5 minutes and called the New Smyrna Beach ER and told them that they had a stroke victim coming in. When we arrived there was a neurologist in the ER. I don't know if she was working that night, or normally they're not neurologists in the ER. But and so she did a stat CT scan and to determine whether it was a bleed or a clot, determined it was a clot, and she administered TPA, which is the clot busting medication. And then called someone, a colleague of hers from Daytona Advent Health, who was a neurointerventional radiologist. And they put me back in the ambulance and sent me to Daytona Advent Health. And he was waiting for me there, took me in to the procedure room and did a thrombectomy. He threaded a catheter into my right groin, all the way up and into my brain, into the cerebral artery, and pulled the clot out. And that he did on the first pass. That all happened within a couple of hours of the initial stroke. So it was within that golden hour period. I went to ICU that night, and the next morning when they came in to make rounds, both he and the neurologist from New Smyrna were there, and they were amazed that I did not have any deficits. And I was, talking fine, and Within 2 days, I was discharged home. One of my favorite texts is Isaiah 45, 1-3. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you go through the rivers, they will not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched. The flames will not set you ablaze. That text came alive to me because I walked through the fire, I walked through the flood, and I was not affected. What I learned from that experience is that the Word of God is a living thing, and it is fulfilled in our lives every day. We need to apply the Word of God and study the Word of God, because that's the thing that directs us in our lives, and it is powerful. I'm into gospel music big time, right? And they have this gospel song about the 3 Hebrew boys in the fire, and he says to his mother, then there were 4 in there. Where did the 4th man go? And she just lit up and said, he's still here, and he's walking with you today. And to me, that's such a beautiful message, that the God that was with the Hebrew children, that was with Daniel, he's still here today, working with us and walking with us.
Is there anything else that the Lord's put on your heart to share? Do you have grandchildren?
I have 2 grandchildren.
Is there anything you want to say to your grandchildren?
Oh,
What is your hope and dream and heart's desire for your grandchildren?
My heart desire is that they will, my little granddaughter, at one point was really she was instrumental in getting the whole family to get baptized. And they did. So I just hope that she will not forget what she learned early in life and will continue to grow and love the Lord and realize how much He loves her, and with my grandson as well. Yeah.